The rain hadn't stopped over London for 11 days. It was the kind of cold that didn't just touch your skin. It got inside your bones. But inside a small flat in Manchester, the cold was irrelevant because Emma was holding her mother's hand, and her mother hadn't spoken in 6 days. The morphine drip clicked every 3 seconds, like a metronome counting down to nothing. Emma's mother, Diane, was 63 years old. 4 months ago, she had been gardening. Now, her body was a battlefield. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer had chewed through her liver, her spine, her lungs. She weighed 70 pounds. Her eyes were open, but they didn't see. They just floated. And then a sound, not a word, a whimper. Emma leaned in. Her mother tried to lift a finger. Her lips moved. No air came out. But Emma had seen this before. She'd read the forums. She'd joined the Facebook groups for families like hers. She knew what her mother was trying to say. Please, let me go. But Emma couldn't. Not because she didn't love her mother, but because it was illegal. Assisted dying, a doctor helping someone end their suffering, is a crime in Britain. You can be sentenced to 14 years in prison, even if you're holding your mother's hand, even if she's begging you with eyes that have already stopped living. That was March. In October, Parliament was going to vote on a new law, the Assisted Dying Bill. It would let terminally ill, mentally competent adults with less than 6 months to live request life-ending medication. Safeguards. 2 doctors. A high court judge, like they have in Oregon, Australia, New Zealand. Polls said 74% of Brits supported it. MPs were split, but leaning yes. Then the vote came, and it failed. Not because of the elected MPs. Not because of the people's representatives. Because of 7 people. 7 men, average age 73. None elected. None answerable to you. None of them had ever held a dying mother's hand while she begged for mercy. They sat in a gilded chamber called the House of Lords. They wore ermine-trimmed robes. They drank port, and they killed the bill. This is the story of the 7 unelected lords who decided that your suffering, or your mother's, is not enough to change the law. This is not a political story. This is a horror story. And it starts with a man named Lord Charlie, a peer who has never had to watch a loved one choke to death on their own fluids. But he has plenty of opinions about what you should be forced to endure. Let me introduce you to the 7. You think you live in a democracy. That's cute. The House of Commons, the people you vote for, passes laws. But then those laws go upstairs, to the House of Lords. A chamber of around 800 people. Most are life peers, appointed for, well, reasons. Some gave money to political parties. Some are friends with the Prime Minister. Some are bishops. Yes, actual bishops from the Church of England. 26 of them. They get automatic seats because God apparently votes Tory. And here's the killer. The Lords can't permanently block a bill that the Commons wants, but they can delay it. They can amend it to death. They can send it back and forth until the government runs out of parliamentary time. That's exactly what happened to the Assisted Dying Bill. The bill had passed its second reading in the Commons, a huge hurdle. MPs voted 330 to 275 in favor. A majority, the people's representatives, said yes. Then it went to the Lords. And the Lords formed a secretive, unofficial kill committee. Not a real committee. No, that would be transparent. This was worse. 7 peers, all veterans of the anti-assisted dying movement, who met privately in a room off the Prince's chamber. No minutes, no press, no public. They call themselves the cross-party group on end-of-life care. Sounds nice, right? Like they care about hospice and pain management. They don't. What they do is weaponize procedure. They file hundreds of amendments. Each amendment requires debate. Each debate takes hours. Parliament has only so many hours, so they run out the clock. The bill dies not because it's defeated, but because it's suffocated. And the ringleader? A man who once said on the record that pain is a symptom of a deeper spiritual sickness. Meet Lord Carlisle of Berriew, but everyone calls him Lord Alex. If you saw Lord Carlisle on the street, you'd think he was your kind grandfather. White hair, wire-rimmed glasses, soft Welsh accent. He wears bow ties and speaks in paragraphs. He was once a Liberal MP. He defended human rights. He even fought for decriminalizing homosexuality in the 1960s. So, how did this man become the Grim Reaper of assisted dying? Simple. He converted to Catholicism in the 1990s. And the Vatican is very clear. Assisted dying is murder. Even if the person is suffering. Even if they beg. Even if they are days from an agonizing death. The Church teaches that suffering brings you closer to God. Lord Carlisle believes that with every fiber of his being. In 2021, during a debate on a previous assisted dying bill, he stood up in the Lords and said, "We are not the masters of life and death. We are the stewards. To assist a suicide is to usurp the divine." He didn't mention Diane. He didn't mention Emma. He didn't mention the 650 Britons a year who travel to Switzerland to die, alone, afraid, often in a warehouse-style clinic because they can't afford a private room. For the rich, assisted dying is a plane ticket. For the poor, it's a rope in a garage. But Lord Carlisle doesn't talk about that. He talks about vulnerable people being pressured into suicide. He says the bill doesn't have enough safeguards. Never mind that Oregon's law has been running for 25 years without a single documented case of coercion. Never mind that in Australia, the oversight is so strict that doctors have been prosecuted for missing a signature. Lord Carlisle doesn't want safeguards. He wants prohibition, because his God said so, and 5 of the other 6 lords on that kill committee agree with him. Now, we meet the most dangerous one, Lord Fields. He's a doctor, a real one, consultant physician, retired, worked in the NHS for 40 years. And that's what makes him lethal. When Lord Fields speaks in the Lords, other peers listen, because he says things like, "I have sat with hundreds of dying patients. I have never, not once, seen a pain that modern palliative care cannot control." Let me translate that. He's lying, or he's willfully blind. Every hospice nurse will tell you, pain is only part of it. There's breathlessness, delirium, vomiting feces if the bowel is blocked. There's terminal agitation, where a dying person screams and thrashes, ripping out 4 lines, because the cancer has spread to the brain. Palliative sedation can knock them unconscious, but that's not the same as relief. It's a chemical coma. Lord Fields knows this, but he uses his medical authority to gaslight families. In a 2019 Lords debate, he called assisted dying a failure of compassion disguised as a solution. Meanwhile, his own colleague, another doctor in the Lords, Baroness Finlay, admitted that 1 in 5 dying patients in the UK has uncontrolled pain at the end of life. Lord Fields just ignores her. He also plays the slippery slope card. First it's terminally ill, he says. Then it's chronically ill. Then it's disabled people. Then it's the elderly who feel like a burden. It's a powerful argument, but it's also a lie. Every country with assisted dying has kept it tightly restricted. Oregon hasn't expanded its law in 25 years. Neither has Washington. In Canada, they did expand, but that's a different law, written differently. Lord Fields knows that. He just assumes you don't. And here's the kicker. Lord Fields has never actually treated a patient who requested assisted dying. Because it's illegal, he has no data, no case studies, no experience with the very thing he's an expert on. But he has a vote, and he used it. Now we get to the one that made Emma cry on a live feed. When Parliament debates assisted dying, the Church of England sends its heavy hitters. The Bishop of London, currently a man named Dame Sarah Mullally. Yes, Dame. And yes, a woman bishop. She's also a former nurse, which is why her testimony is so devastating. In the 2024 Lord's session, she rose to speak against the bill. She said, "My nursing background taught me that every life has intrinsic worth until the very last breath." Then she said, "The state should never provide death as a service." Then she sat down, and 13 other bishops, available to vote on any law they want, despite representing a religion that 53% of us no longer follow, voted the same way. Here's the brutal truth. The Church of England is terrified of assisted dying, not because of theology, the Bible doesn't mention it, but because if people can choose a gentle death, they might stop seeing suffering as redemptive. And if suffering isn't redemptive, why go to church? Why pray for a miracle? Why donate to religious hospices? The bishops aren't just blocking a bill. They're protecting an institution. But the Bishop of London has a personal reason, too. In 2017, she watched her own father die of cancer. He was in a hospice. The nurses were kind. But for the last 3 days, he couldn't swallow. He was thirsty. He made a sound like a bird caught in a chimney. The nurses gave him ice chips. He couldn't swallow those either. She told a friend later, "It was the hardest thing I've ever witnessed." But she still opposes assisted dying because, she says, suffering is not the worst thing. The worst thing is to lose hope. Try telling that to Diane. Try telling that to the man in the next bed who has locked-in syndrome and can only move his eyes. He blinked, "Kill me," for 3 weeks before pneumonia took him. The bishops don't blink. They vote, and Diane's suffering continues. Not all the peers are religious. 2 of the 7 are pure political operatives. Lord Ashcroft, former Conservative Party treasurer, billionaire, tax exile, yes, he doesn't even pay UK taxes, but he gets to make UK law. And Lord Blencathra, a former MP who ran the No to Assisted Dying campaign for a decade. Ashcroft is interesting. He doesn't speak much in debates. He prefers to work behind the scenes. But he funded a massive study in 2020 that claimed 90% of disabled people fear assisted dying laws would lead to pressure on them to die. The study was later debunked. The sample size was 200 people. The questions were leading. It was published by a conservative think tank that Ashcroft funds. But the media ran with the headline, and those headlines swayed MPs. Blencathra is the opposite. He's a bulldog. He filibusters. He once spoke for 3 hours and 12 minutes against a similar bill in 2015. He used props, a giant chart of countries that legalized and regretted it. The chart had 3 countries. One was Nazi Germany. That's not a joke. He literally compared Oregon to the Nazis. When called out, he said, "The principle is the same, the state deciding who lives and who dies." By that logic, seatbelt laws are fascism. But Blencathra doesn't care about logic. He cares about winning. And his strategy is simple. Delay, delay, delay. Every amendment, no matter how small, must be debated for the full time. Every clause must be examined word by word. He once moved an amendment to change the word may to must on page 47. It took 90 minutes to defeat. While he talked, Diane lay in her bed. While he sipped water and adjusted his glasses, Emma watched her mother's skin turn yellow. Blencathra has never met Emma. He doesn't have to. He has a gilded chamber and a title. And that's enough. Now we go inside the room. The prince's chamber is a small, wood-panel room off the main lord's debating hall. Portraits of Tudor princes stare down from the walls. There's a fireplace that hasn't been lit since 1952. And on October 14th, 2024, at 6 p.m., 7 men and women gathered here. Lord Carlisle at the head. Lord Fields to his right. The Bishop of London to his left. Ashcroft on Zoom from Belize. Because he doesn't pay UK tax, but he does attend meetings via encrypted link. Blencathra with his binder full of amendments. 2 more. Baroness Stoll, former Conservative leader in the Lords, and Lord Young of Cookham, another ex-MP, age 83, who once said, "I've never met a patient who asked to die," a claim so absurd that a nurse in the public gallery laughed out loud. The meeting lasted 3 hours. No official record exists, but a staffer leaked the gist to a journalist from The Guardian. They discussed timing. The bill would come to the Lords on November 22nd. They had 5 weeks to prepare. Their goal, attach at least 50 amendments. Each amendment would need a separate vote. Each vote would need a debate. The government had set aside only 2 days for the entire Lords process. 2 days, 50 amendments. Mathematically impossible to pass. They also discussed the personal stories. Lord Fields suggested they find a disabled activist who feared the bill. They would fly them to London, put them on TV. Blencathra said he already had one. A woman named Margaret, who uses a wheelchair and believes the bill sends a message that my life is worth less. Margaret is sincere. She is not a puppet, but her fear is based on a misunderstanding. The bill explicitly excluded disabled people unless they were also terminally ill. But nuance doesn't make news. Fear does. And the 7 lords knew that. By the end of the meeting, they had a plan. They would not kill the bill with one dramatic vote. They would bleed it to death, slowly, politely, with bow ties and tea. Emma, back in Manchester, was on a waiting list for a palliative care nurse. Her mother had developed a bedsore the size of a fist. She hadn't slept in 48 hours. She didn't know the Lords were meeting. She didn't know her mother's fate was being decided in a room with portraits of dead princes. Ignorance, in this case, was not bliss. It was a crime scene. November 22nd, 2024. The Lord's Chamber. Chandeliers the size of small cars. Red leather benches. The mace of office glittering under lights that cost £10,000 a year to maintain. The assisted dying bill was called for its committee stage. This is where amendments are debated. The government had expected maybe 20 amendments. They got 187. Lord Blencathra stood up first. He moved Amendment 1 to require that the 2 independent doctors must include 1 specialist in palliative care. Sounds reasonable, right? Actually, it was poison. The bill already required 2 doctors, one of whom had to be a consultant. Adding palliative care specialists would mean that in rural areas, where there might be only 1 such specialist for 200 miles, patients would have to wait months. And terminally ill patients don't have months. The amendment was defeated, but it took 47 minutes of debate. Then Amendment 4, to require a mandatory psychological assessment for all applicants. Again, sounds good, but the bill already required a mental capacity assessment under the Mental Capacity Act. Adding a separate psychologist would add £2,000 per patient. Poor people priced out. The amendment was defeated. Another 52 minutes. Amendment 7, to require that the lethal medication be administered only by a doctor, not self-administered. This one was clever. In Oregon, most patients self-administer. They drink a liquid. That's important because some patients want to change their minds at the last second. If a doctor administers it via 4, reversal is almost impossible. The amendment was designed to remove patient autonomy. Defeated. 68 minutes. By 8 p.m., they had gotten through 12 amendments. 175 remained. The session ended. The next session wouldn't be for 3 weeks. 3 weeks in parliamentary time. But for Diane, 3 weeks is a lifetime. And she didn't have a lifetime left. Let me pause the politics. Because politics is abstract. Suffering is not. Emma kept a diary. Her mother's last weeks. She shared it with a friend, who shared it with a journalist, who shared it with me. Here's an entry from November 18th, for days before that first Lord's vote. Mum tried to speak today. A sound came out. Not a word. A croak. I held a spoon of water to her lips, and she turned her head away. The district nurse said the tumor has spread to her throat now. She can't swallow. Not even her own spit. There's a suction machine, but it's loud, and she cries when we use it. She cries without tears because she's so dehydrated. I asked the doctor if we could give her more morphine. He said she's already on the maximum for her weight. I asked about palliative sedation. He said the hospice has a 6-week waiting list. I asked if I could just hold her hand while she dies. He said, I'm already doing that. That same day, Lord Fields gave a speech at a private dinner in London. He said, the so-called right to die movement is a toxic blend of neoliberalism and nihilism. It tells people that their suffering has no meaning. No meaning? Diane raised 3 children. She volunteered at an animal shelter. She knitted blankets for homeless newborns. Her suffering has every meaning. The meaning is love. Love from Emma. Love that is now being stretched on a rack of slow suffocation. Lord Fields doesn't see that. He sees an abstraction. Society's attitude toward the vulnerable. Emma sees her mother's fingernails turning blue because the oxygen is so low. By December, the bill was stalled. The Lords had passed 31 amendments. 156 remained. Public frustration was building. Sky News ran a segment called The Peers Who Won't Let You Die. It featured a woman named Janet, whose husband, a former firefighter, had taken his own life in his van in a forest because he couldn't bear the pain of bone cancer. He left a note. I didn't want to go like this, but the law left me no other way. The segment went viral. 12 million views. The hashtag Let Us Die With Dignity trended for 3 days. But the Lords don't care about hashtags. They care about procedure. And they have all the time in the world until something changed. A secret recording. A junior clerk in the Lords, horrified by what she was witnessing, used her phone to record a private conversation between Lord Carlisle and Lord Blencathra in a corridor after a late-night session. The recording is grainy, but the words are clear. Lord Blencathra: "We just need to hold out until February. The election will be called in March. The bill will die with Parliament." Lord Carlisle: "Yes, but we must be careful. The public mood is turning." Lord Blencathra: "The public mood doesn't vote in the Lords." That recording was leaked to the Times. It ran on the front page. The headline: Peer: "Public mood doesn't vote Iron Lords. Scandal over assisted dying bill." Suddenly, the story was no longer about procedure. It was about democracy, or the lack of it. Parliament reconvened on January 15th. The mood was different. Several Tory peers had defected in the Commons, voting for the bill despite their party's official opposition. Now, some Lords were feeling the heat. Lord Carlisle opened the session with a long speech about the sanctity of life. He quoted C.S. Lewis. He quoted Pope Francis. He quoted his own mother, who died in 2008, peacefully at home with no need for any intervention. The chamber listened politely. Then a voice rang out from the crossbenches. Baroness Brinton, a Liberal Democrat peer who uses a wheelchair, and who, ironically, had once supported the bill before changing her mind. She said, "The noble Lord speaks of sanctity, but I speak of reality. Every day, people die badly in this country, not because we lack medicine, but because we lack courage. This House must vote yes on third reading." A murmur, a ripple. For a moment, it seemed possible. The government had agreed to a single day of debate on the remaining amendments. If they could defeat the filibuster, the bill would go to a final vote. But then Lord Field stood up. He didn't speak about procedure. He spoke about a single patient, a fictional one, he admitted later, but a composite. "I remember a woman named Patricia," he said, "terminal cancer. She asked for assisted dying because she was afraid of being a burden. We controlled her pain. We got her home. She lived another 4 months. She saw her granddaughter born. Her family thanked me for not giving her the poison she thought she wanted." The chamber was silent, because Lord Fields had done something powerful. He had weaponized hope. What he didn't say: for every Patricia who finds for more months, there are 10 Dianes who find only 4 more weeks of agony. But he didn't need to say that. He just needed to make the peers feel good about themselves. They voted. Amendment 157 to 187 were bundled into a single kill motion disguised as a minor change. It passed by 20 votes. The clock ran out. The session ended. The bill was dead, not defeated, just expired. That night, Lord Carlisle hosted a small reception in his official apartment in the Palace of Westminster. The wine was Chateau Margaux, 2005. The port was Taylor's 1994. The guests were the same 7 lords, plus a few bishops. A journalist from The Spectator, a conservative magazine, attended under strict off-the-record rules. But later, he wrote a piece that slipped the details. Lord Blencathra was overheard saying, "We've done the country a favor. In 10 years, they'll thank us." Baroness Stowe added, "The next bill will come in 5 years. We'll kill that one, too. It's a marathon, not a sprint." They clinked glasses. Meanwhile, in a hospice in Birmingham, a 54-year-old man named David with terminal lung cancer was found dead in the bathroom. He had hanged himself with an iPhone charging cable. He left a note. "I tried to wait for the law, but I can't. The drowning feeling won't stop. Please don't blame my wife." His wife, Helen, was asleep in the next room. She hadn't slept in 3 days. She had taken a sleeping pill. When she woke up, David was cold. David was one of the 650, the ones who don't make it to Switzerland, the ones who take matters into their own hands. In the UK, the suicide rate among terminally ill people is 3 times higher than the general population. But the Lords don't count those deaths. They only count the ones they think they're preventing. The bill died on January 28th. By February, the outrage had cooled. By March, The Ukraine war dominated the news. By April, most people had forgotten, but Emma didn't forget. Diane died on February 14th. Valentine's Day. Her last word was not love or goodbye. It was a wet, rattling groan, the death rattle, the sound every hospice nurse dreads. Emma sat with her for 4 hours after she stopped breathing, because the funeral home couldn't come until morning. The body cooled. The skin turned marble gray. Emma held the hand. She whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I couldn't save you. I couldn't even let you go." That week, she wrote a letter to Lord Carlisle. She sent it to the House of Lords. It read, "Dear Lord Carlisle, you don't know me. My name is Emma. My mother just died of pancreatic cancer. For the last 4 months, she asked me every day to help her die. I couldn't because of you. I watched her choke. I watched her rot. I watched her become a skeleton who still breathed. You spoke of sanctity. You spoke of divine will. My mother was an atheist. Her will was to leave, and you denied her that. I hope you never have to watch what I watched. But if you do, I hope you remember this letter, and I hope you feel ashamed. Yours, Emma." Lord Carlisle's office sent a form letter back. It thanked her for her passionate contribution to the debate and suggested she speak with her local MP about palliative care funding. Emma burned the letter. Then she started a YouTube channel. It's called Diane's Voice. She has 1.2 million subscribers. Her first video, a 19-minute monologue filmed in her kitchen, with red eyes and no makeup, has 9 million views. In it, she says, they call themselves Democrats, but they sit in an unelected chamber, drinking wine from glasses that cost more than my weekly shop, and they decide that my mother's suffering is a virtue. It is not a virtue. It is an atrocity. And I will spend every day of my life making sure you know their names. She then lists the 7. Lord Carlisle, Lord Fields, the Bishop of London, Lord Ashcroft, Lord Blencathra, Baroness Stowell, Lord Young, and she ends with, they wear robes, but underneath they are just 7 people who have never had to say goodbye the way I did, and that makes them cowards, not lords, cowards. You might be asking, why can't the government just fire them? Good question. Answer, because the House of Lords is a constitutional abomination. Membership is for life. You cannot be removed except for criminal conviction or bankruptcy. Even then, it's rare. Lord Ashcroft was convicted of tax fraud in Belize, not a crime in the UK, so he stays. Lord Blencathra was accused of lobbying impropriety. Nothing happened. The only way to reform the Lords is an act of Parliament, but Parliament is full of people who either serve in the Lords or hope to be appointed to the Lords. It's a closed loop, a gentleman's club with legislative power. In 2024, a poll found that 67% of Brits want to abolish the Lords. 12% want to keep it. The rest don't care. But the ones who want to keep it are the ones with the power to abolish it. That's not a democracy. That's a hostage situation. Emma's channel has a recurring segment called Lords Misrule. She profiles one peer each week. Her episode on Lord Ashcroft, who lives and believes pays no UK tax, but voted on a law affecting UK taxpayers, has 3 million views. In it, she says, if I didn't pay taxes, I'd be in prison. He gets a title. The media focus on Emma, but she is one of thousands. There is Mark, whose wife had multiple sclerosis. She took an overdose of her own medication, crushed it into yogurt, because she couldn't lift her arms to reach her mouth. Mark found her. He has not slept in his own bedroom since. It's been 3 years. There is Priya, whose father had ALS. He could only blink. He blinked, yes, when she asked if he wanted to go to Switzerland, but he was too weak to travel, so he stopped drinking water. It took 11 days. On day 8, he tried to bite his own tongue off. A nurse tied his jaw shut with a bandage. There is William, a former nurse himself, whose lung cancer metastasized to his spine. He asked his doctor for a prescription for barbiturates, knowing they would be lethal. The doctor refused. William took 200 paracetamol instead. He vomited for 3 days before his liver failed. He died in a pool of his own bile. These stories don't make the news because they are too graphic, too upsetting, too real, But the Lords know these stories. They choose to ignore them, because to acknowledge them would be to admit that their abstract principles have concrete victims. And that is a mirror no one in Ermine wants to look into. Here's the cruel irony. The assisted dying movement in the UK is stronger than ever. Polls now show 78% support. A new bill is being drafted by a cross-party group of MPs. It will be introduced in 2026. But the Lords are already preparing. Lord Carlisle has formed a new Special Inquiry Committee on End-of-Life Choices. Again, a nice name. Its real purpose: to produce a 500-page report concluding that more evidence is needed. He will use that report to delay the next bill by another 2 years. By then, another general election will be called. Parliament will dissolve. The bill will die again, and the cycle continues. Meanwhile, 650 people a year travel to Switzerland. Unknown numbers take their own lives in pain and desperation. And the 7 Lords sit in their gilded chamber, drinking port, congratulating themselves on their moral courage. To be fair, I should let one of the Lords speak for themselves. Lord Fields agreed to an interview with a podcast in early 2025. In it, he said, "I understand emotion. I really do. But emotion is not a good basis for law. If we legalize assisted dying, we change the doctor-patient relationship forever. Doctors will become executioners. Vulnerable people will feel pressure. And once you open that door, you can't close it. I have seen countries where the safeguards eroded over time. It always happens." The host asked, "What about the people who are suffering now? What do you say to them?" Lord Fields paused. Then he said, "I say that I am sorry. And I say that we must do better on palliative care. But I cannot say that killing is a solution." Emma watched that interview. She made a response video. In it, she held up a photo of her mother in the final week. You could see the bedsore, the yellow skin, the cracked lips. She said, "Look at this photo. Then tell me that more morphine would have fixed it. Tell me that a hospice visit once a week would have stopped the drowning. Tell me that my mother's request for death was a symptom of inadequate pain control, and not the rational choice of a woman who had already said goodbye, settled her affairs, and wanted only to leave with dignity." Then she played a recording. It was her mother's voice, from a month before she lost the ability to speak. It said, "Please, I'm not sad. I'm not depressed. I'm finished. Let me go." The video ended with no music, no call to action, just silence. It has 14 million views. Now we get to the twist that no one saw coming. In March 2025, a journalist named Helen Pitt of The Guardian filed a Freedom of Information request to the House of Lords. She asked for any records of peers traveling to Switzerland for assisted dying in the last decade. The Lords refused. She appealed. The Information Commissioner forced disclosure. The result: 3 peers had traveled to Dignitas between 2015 and 2024. Their names were redacted, but the dates and circumstances were not. One peer, a former conservative minister, took his wife to Switzerland in 2018. She had Huntington's disease. The peer later voted against an assisted dying bill while attending the Lords via proxy because he was too elderly to travel. Another peer, a labor life baroness, accompanied her brother to Basel in 2021. He had motor neuron disease. She returned and gave a speech in the Lords praising the wonderful, humane Swiss system. Then she voted against the UK bill because we are not ready. The third, most damning, was a peer who used assisted dying themselves. The records show a Lord X, name withheld due to medical privacy, traveled to Switzerland in 2019, received a lethal prescription and died. His family later released a statement. He died peacefully, on his own terms, surrounded by family. That peer had, in 2015, spoken in the Lords against assisted dying for 45 minutes. He called it a betrayal of the vulnerable. He was a vulnerable one, and he chose to die in a foreign country, in a clinic away from home, because he was too afraid of the British legal system. He didn't want to be a burden on his family. Sound familiar? The hypocrisy was so staggering that even the Daily Mail, usually a supporter of the Lords, ran the headline, "Swiss Escape. The peers who say one thing and do another." Lord Carlisle refused to comment. Lord Fields called the report misleading, but the damage was done. The seven lords' moral authority, already shaky, shattered completely. As of today, the assisted dying bill is being rewritten. The new version includes a supervised judicial override, meaning a high court judge can approve a request even if the lords delay it. Legal scholars say it might survive the filibuster, but the lords will fight back. They are already planning to challenge the bill's compatibility with the European Convention on Human Rights. They will argue that Article 2, right to life, prohibits any state-sponsored death. The courts may agree. Then the bill would have to go to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. That takes years. Years, during which more Dianes will die badly. More Marks will find their wives. More Emmas will sit in silent flats, holding cold hands. The seven lords are old. Lord Carlisle is 77. Lord Fields is 81. Lord Young is 86. They may not live to see the final battle, but their legacy, a legacy of delay, a procedural murder, of abstract principle over concrete agony, will live on unless something changes. Emma is trying to change it. Her YouTube channel now funds a small legal team. They are preparing a case to the Supreme Court, arguing that the ban on assisted dying violates Article 8, right to private and family life, and Article 3, prohibition of inhuman and degrading treatment. She says, forcing someone to endure degrading death is degrading treatment. The court will have to agree. It's a long shot, but it's the only shot left. I want to end where we began, with Emma and Diane. The last entry in Emma's diary is from February 13th, the day before her mother died. It reads, Mom's breathing changed tonight. The rattle is louder. The nurse says it's a sign. 24 hours maybe. I asked her if there was anything else we could do. She said we could try suction again. I said no. Mom hates the suction. So we just sit. I'm holding her right hand. Her left hand is curled tight from the contractures. There's a bed sore on her tailbone the size of a tangerine. I can't look at it without crying. So I don't look. I just hold her hand. And I whisper. I tell her it's okay. I tell her I love her. I tell her I'm sorry. She can't respond. But her thumb moves. Tiny. Back and forth. Like she's stroking my skin. That's how we talk now. Thumb strokes. 1 for yes. 2 for no. I asked her if she's scared. 1 thumb. Yes. I asked her if she wants to go. 1 thumb. Yes. I asked her if she's angry at me for not being able to help. She didn't answer. Just squeezed. I'm crying so hard I can't see the page. But I want this written, so that someone knows. She was not a case study. She was not a vote. She was my mom. And she was brave. And she was let down by 7 men in robes who will never know her name. But I will say it again and again until my voice gives out. Diane Margaret Holloway. Born July 12, 1961. Died not yet, but soon. And when she goes, she will go in pain. Because 7 unelected lords decided that her suffering has meaning. It doesn't. It has only this, a daughter who will never forgive them. Diane died at 4:47 a.m. on February 14th. Emma was asleep in the chair beside her. She woke up to silence. No rattle. No thumb strokes. Just a stillness that felt like a scream. She closed her mother's eyes. She kissed her forehead. She walked to the window and watched the sunrise over Manchester. The rain had finally stopped. And somewhere in London, Lord Carlisle was probably eating toast. Unaware, unbothered, untouchable. That is a story of 7 unelected lords who blocked an assisted dying bill. It is not a story about politics. It is a story about power. The power of procedure. The power of titles. The power of people who have never suffered deciding what suffering means. Emma is still making videos. Her most recent has a simple title, 1 thumb, yes. It is a recording of her asking her mother, those last days, if she wanted to die, and her mother's thumb, moving once. Yes, the video is 11 seconds long. It has 47 million views. Watch it if you dare, but be warned, you will not sleep the same after, because now you know their names. Lord Carlisle, Lord Fields, the Bishop of London, Lord Ashcroft, Lord Blencathra, Baroness Stowell, Lord Young, 7 unelected lords, 1 dying woman's thumb. And a question that no rogue can answer. What would you do if it was your hand you were holding?